He rubbed his thumb across the knotted wood. The quiet had weight, his only companion since his wife passed 3 years ago, slipping quietly from childbirth before he could comprehend what had been taken. Folks in town tried to talk to him afterward, but sympathy felt like grit in his teeth. He had folded himself inward instead, living by work and silence, keeping company only with his horses and the honest ache of unfinished days. A distant sound split the night. It was small, nearly swallowed by the wind, but it was wrong, too human, too scared. Caleb raised his head. His breath stilled. The sound came again, 3 knocks, soft yet urgent, like someone trying not to wake spirits but needing to wake a man. Caleb rose, hesitant. Midnight brought coyotes, not visitors. His boots pressed quietly against the floor as he moved toward the door. His hand hovered above the latch for a heartbeat longer than reason required. When he opened it, the lanternless darkness blinked, and then took shape. A girl stood on his porch, barefoot, hair unbound, a faded indigo dress clinging to her small frame as if the prairie wind intended to tear it from her. She looked no older than 20, though exhaustion made her eyes seem older. Her breath fogged the cold air, trembling as though it feared breaking apart before it reached him. "You are Caleb Boone," she whispered, the words soft and accented, but steady enough to reach him. He nodded, wary. The girl pressed her hands together, as if holding something invisible between them. "Mama is birthing a baby," she said. She cannot do it alone." The night seemed to pause. Caleb felt a sharp pull inside his ribs, familiar, unwelcome. Birth was a storm he had seen before, one that had taken everything from him. His throat tightened, the ghost of his wife's pale face flickering across memory. He stepped back half an inch, instinctively creating space he didn't want to explain. "There's the midwife," he muttered. "Etta Crowley. She lives closer to town." "I went." The girl swallowed. "She would not come. Mama is not from here. Said she is busy until sunrise." Her eyes lowered a moment, shame resting on her lashes. "Mama is hurting. Baby is coming too fast." Too fast. Caleb knew what that meant. Too fast often meant too late. A coldness slid through him, not from the winter but from the past rising like old smoke. He had sworn never to stand in a birthing room again. He was a rancher, not a healer. The prairie took women far stronger than he could protect. And this girl, she was a stranger. Chinese. One of the railroad families drifting on the edges of town. Helping her would invite whispers, trouble, pain. But she didn't move, didn't plead, didn't cry. She simply stood in the lanternless dark, hands clasped with quiet dignity, as though she already expected him to refuse and was prepared to bear that rejection, too. Something in the stillness around her felt too familiar, like the tired silence of someone who had already lost too much. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mei Lin," she said, bowing her head as though giving him something fragile. "How far?" "Half-mile," she whispered. "Mama cannot walk." I ran. Her breath was shaking now. Not desperate, controlled, measured, the way someone who had learned to hide fear would breathe. Caleb understood that kind of steadiness. It was the kind a person learned only after being ignored too often. He exhaled a slow breath, looked past her toward the prairie, toward the stretch of land where moonlight lay like spilled milk, toward the direction where a woman was fighting for her life, with no one except her daughter to hold her steady. Caleb felt his pulse shift, not quickening, but aligning, like a horse catching cue from its rider. "Hold on," he murmured. He reached for the lantern by the door and struck a match. The flame caught slow, then brightened, painting Mei Lin's face in gold. Only now did he see how young she truly was, how thin her hands, how tight her jaw from holding back fear. Her eyes glimmered like dark glass, alert, pleading without a single spoken plea. He lit a second lantern, then a third, lining them along the porch railing. Mei Lin watched, confusion touching her brow. Caleb didn't explain. He simply lit them all until the entire porch glowed like a beacon carved from night. "You came to the right place," he said, voice low, steady. "Let's get your mother." For a moment, Mei Lin stood frozen, as though she could not believe the shift. Then her shoulders sagged, not collapsing, but releasing, like a bowstring eased after too long strained. She nodded once, not trusting herself to speak. Caleb stepped outside, the cold greeting him like a forgotten acquaintance. He moved with clarity now, pulling on his coat, grabbing rope, checking his horse's reins. Every movement felt heavier than it should, but also strangely right, as though he were picking up tools he thought he'd buried forever. Mei Lin walked a half-step ahead, guiding him, lantern light chasing her shadow across the frost-tipped grass. Her steps were hurried, but she stayed close enough that he could hear her breathing, steadying herself with each stride. "Your mama," he said quietly. "Is she strong?" Mei Lin hesitated. "She was," she whispered. "Before the railroad camp, before the winter." He didn't ask more. Some stories were clear even when unsaid. The prairie widened before them, the moon sinking lower, the darkness stretching deeper with each step they took. Caleb felt the old ache in his chest stir, fear shaped like memory, but the warmth of the lanterns behind them glowed against his back, almost like a blessing. As they neared a crooked shack in the distance, Mei Lin stopped abruptly. Caleb followed her line of sight, and the breath in his chest tightened. A scream, faint but unmistakable, tore through the night. He looked at Mei Lin. She looked at him. "Please," she whispered. Caleb Boone lifted the lantern higher, and stepped toward the sound. The prairie at night was a world of shadows and half-whispered winds, where even the stars seemed to hold their breath. Caleb Boone followed close behind Mei Lin as she cut across the frost-laced grass, her slight figure moving with a determined grace that belied the tremor in her breath. His lantern swung in his hand, scattering gold across the darkness, turning each blade of winter-bitten grass into a thin, trembling shard. His horse trailed behind, reins looped loosely in Caleb's fingers. The animal sensed urgency before any human word could name it. Its ears twitched, hooves crunching through frost like slow thunder. Caleb felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle over him, not unwelcome but unervingly alive, something he had not allowed himself to feel since grief hollowed him out. "Up ahead," Mei Lin whispered, pointing at a crooked shape hunched against the horizon. The shack looked less like a house and more like a forgotten promise. Half-broken roof sagging, planks warped, a faint orange glow pushing through the cracks where a fire burned too low. As they neared, a cry tore through the door, sharp, agonized, unmistakably human. Mei Lin's steps faltered, her hand flew to her mouth. Caleb reached out without thinking and steadied her elbow. She didn't pull away. For a moment their breaths mingled in the cold, her fear and his old sorrow intertwining like two strands of wind searching for direction. "She's strong," he murmured, though he wasn't sure if he was comforting her or himself. Inside the shack, heat and panic clashed in the air. The place was small, bare dirt floor, a thin mattress laid out near the hearth, steam rising off a pot of boiling rags. Lian Zhao lay on her side, gripping the blanket beneath her with white knuckles. Sweat slicked her brow. Her dark hair clung to her temples. Her breaths came in short, jolting bursts, each one sounding more exhausted than the last. Mei Lin dropped to her knees beside her mother, whispering in Mandarin before switching to English, voice trembling. "Mama, I brought someone. He will help." Caleb knelt, careful not to intrude, yet close enough to assess what little he remembered from his own haunted past. Lian's belly tightened again, and a guttural cry pushed through clenched teeth. "Too fast," Mei Lin had said. Too fast usually meant danger. Bodies weren't meant to hurry such ancient, difficult work. He checked the fire, fed it more wood, then scanned the dim room. No towels except what Mei Lin had washed. No tools except a kettle and a dull knife. No midwife. No backup. Just a girl trying to hold her mother together with bare hands and hope. "You boiled these?" Caleb asked. "Yes." Mei Lin lifted one with shaking fingers. "I did as I saw the midwife do last year when her neighbor had a baby." "You learn fast," he murmured. The praise startled her. She ducked her head quickly. He moved with deliberate calm, fetching the water, wetting cloths, cooling Lian's forehead. He didn't touch her belly, he knew his limits, but he could steady the world around her. Every movement he made dulled the edge of panic in the room, softening the air just enough that Lien was able to unclench her fists. A contraction ripped through her, wrenching her entire body upward. Mei Lin held her shoulders, whispering, praying. Caleb held the lantern higher, creating a pool of warmth in the dimness, a small piece of steadiness. "Where is the father?" he asked gently during the lull. Mei Lin's voice thinned. "He died on the railroad line 4 months ago. A rockslide. They sent us away when he did not return." Caleb's jaw tightened. Grief recognized grief. It moved similarly across all faces, all languages. Lien's eyes fluttered open then, fixing on him. In them he saw exhaustion layered with something else. Fear sharpened by the knowledge that she did not belong to this land, that if she slipped away tonight, the world would not pause long enough to notice. He bowed his head slightly in respect, and something in her gaze softened. Another contraction built. Mei Lin gripped her mother's hand as the shack rattled with pain. Caleb snapped into motion, refreshing the cloths, preparing the space, steadying the room again. Sweat gathered across his shoulders from the heat of the fire, but he didn't step back. Outside, a dog barked. A light flickered in the distance. Someone had noticed lanterns moving across the prairie. Gossip traveled quicker than storms in these parts. Soon, the town would talk. Outsider families. Rancher helping foreigners. Caleb Boone losing his mind to grief and strangers. He pushed the thought away. He needed help. A real midwife. He looked at Mei Lin. "Stay with her." Her eyes widened. "Where are you going?" "To get Etta Crowley," he said. "She'll come when I'm the one asking." Mei Lin looked torn. "She refused me. I begged. She said Mama was not her concern." Lien moaned again, voice cracking like thin wood. Mei Lin flinched. Caleb placed a firm hand on the girl's shoulder. "Your mother needs her. Trust me." And for reasons she couldn't explain, she did. Mei Lin nodded. Caleb stepped outside. The cold slapped him, searing his lungs. He mounted his horse, lantern swinging from the saddle, casting wild shadows that raced alongside him as he galloped toward town. Each hoofbeat felt like hammering against fate, each breath a vow he didn't have words for. He had failed one woman once. He would not fail another. The ride was short but felt carved from eternity. He reached Etta Crowley's cabin and pounded on the door until her lamp sputtered awake behind the glass. "What's the meaning, Caleb Boone?" she muttered, opening the door. "It's past midnight. Lien Zhao is in labor. It's going wrong." Her expression stiffened. "That girl? Caleb, she's not. Etta." His voice cut through frost. "Come. Now." Something in his tone, or his eyes, made her swallow her objections. She grabbed her satchel and coat, grumbling but moving quickly. They rode back under a hemorrhaging dawn, sky bruised violet and ash. When the shack came into view, Caleb felt something twist in his chest. Fear, urgency, a memory he wished he could forget. But the door was shut. The fire still glowed. Before Etta could step inside, a cry rose, sharper, louder, unmistakably final. Mei Lin's voice followed, trembling through the cracks. "Caleb, something is wrong." And the lantern light behind the door flickered as if struggling to stay alive. The moment Caleb crossed the threshold, the room's heat struck him like a wall, thick, smoky, trembling with the sound of a woman fighting to stay tethered to life. Lien Zhao lay twisted in pain, her face pale beneath the sheen of sweat, her breaths shallow and fractured. Mei Lin knelt beside her, one hand gripping her mother's, the other trying to keep the damp cloth steady though her fingers trembled uncontrollably. When she looked up at Caleb, fear shimmered behind her composure like a candle threatening to gut her out. Etta Crowley pushed past him with brisk purpose, her satchel bumping against her hip. The midwife's eyes swept the room, gathering all the missing pieces. A too fast labor, a too small space, a too young daughter holding the whole world together with little more than willpower. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Work came before judgment. "Boil more water," Etta ordered, already rolling up her sleeves. Caleb obeyed without argument. The kettle hissed as he set it on the fire, steam curling into the air like coiling spirits. Behind him, Lien cried out, the sound sharp enough to split the night a second time. Mei Lin flinched with every contraction, as if each one tore through her own body as well. Caleb felt something twist inside him, a remembered helplessness, an echo of kneeling beside another bed, another woman, another night he could not undo. He pushed the memory down. This wasn't the past. And it didn't have to end the same. Etta leaned over Lien, voice steady but urgent. Babies turned wrong. We don't have much time. Mei Lin stiffened. What does that mean? That we work quick and pray harder, Etta said. The girl's eyes darted to Caleb, searching for an anchor. He didn't offer false comfort, only a firm nod that seemed to give her spine strength again. She pressed her forehead against her mother's arm, whispering in Mandarin, her voice trembling but somehow calming the air around them. Etta guided Lien through the next contraction, adjusting her position, coaxing her body into cooperation. Caleb brought the water before she needed to ask, then fetched clean cloths, then stoked the fire. Every task felt like stitching together something fragile, trying to hold off whatever darkness hovered at the edges of the room. Minutes stretched the way hours stretch in a storm, slow, merciless, full of quiet terror. Lien's breathing grew ragged. Etta's hands moved fast. Mei Lin whispered prayers that blended with her mother's pained gasps. Caleb kept the lantern close, feeding its glow into the space like a vow. His palms felt slick, his heart beat too loud, the weight of being near another birth pressed against him with unbearable memory. But he anchored himself in movement, in service, in every small act that could save a woman who should never have been left to suffer alone. At last, Etta gave a low, commanding shout. Now. Push. Lien's cry tore from the depths of her, raw and desperate. Mei Lin sobbed into her shoulder. The air trembled with the force of the moment. Then, silence. A heartbeat, maybe two. A thin wail rose, fragile but determined. Mei Lin gasped. Caleb's breath rushed out of him like something long held finally released. Etta worked quickly, clearing the baby's airway, rubbing its back until the weak cry grew stronger. A girl. Small, nearly weightless, but undeniably alive. Etta wrapped her in a cloth and handed her to Mei Lin, who cradled her like something holy. But the relief was short-lived. Lien sagged backward, eyes unfocused, breath too faint. Blood pooled where it shouldn't. Etta's face hardened. She's losing too much. Mei Lin looked up, panic slicing through her fragile joy. Mama? Mama. Caleb moved to her other side, steadying Lien's head. Lien, stay with us. Hear your daughter. Hear your granddaughter. Lien blinked slowly. Her lips parted, forming words Mei Lin understood long before English caught their shape. Be strong. Etta worked feverishly, applying pressure, using every scrap of knowledge she owned, but the blood kept coming. Caleb felt cold seep into his bones despite the heat of the fire. He had feared this, feared it with a familiarity that made his hands shake. No. Not again. Not like this. Not another woman fading beneath his helpless watch. He pressed down when Etta told him to, not flinching at the warmth of the blood soaking through the cloth. He kept his eyes on Lien's face, willing her to stay tethered to this world. Mei Lin whispered fiercely, urgently, as though fighting death with her voice alone. The minutes stretched, agonizing and fragile. Then, slowly, too slowly, the bleeding eased. Etta sagged with relief, though she kept her hands steady. She'll live, the midwife whispered. But she's weak. Very weak. Mei Lin collapsed forward, clutching her mother, sobs shaking her small frame. Caleb let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, his shoulders sagging. The fear inside him loosened its grip, though it didn't leave entirely. It rarely did. Lien's hand rose weakly, brushing Mei Lin's cheek. Her voice was the faintest thread. Thank you. Caleb didn't know if it was meant for her daughter, for Etta, or for him. Perhaps for all three. It didn't matter. Gratitude had its own language. The baby cried again, softer now. Mei Lin held her close, tears streaking her cheeks, but in her arms was a piece of dawn, fragile, warm, alive. Caleb stepped back, letting them breathe as a family for the first time in too long. He straightened the lantern, wiped his hands clean, steadied the fire. The shack no longer felt like a place of despair. It felt like a threshold. Something new had come into the world, and something old had loosened its grip. Exhaustion wrapped around him, but beneath it was a quiet, unfamiliar warmth. Purpose, maybe. Or redemption wearing a borrowed name. Etta, packing her tools, shot him a sideways look. Not hostile. Not approving. Simply acknowledging. "You did good, Caleb Boone," she murmured. "Didn't reckon you'd ever walk into a birthing room again." He stiffened. Mei Lin looked up sharply, sensing more in those words than she understood. Caleb didn't answer. The past was a wound with no name tonight. Instead, he stepped toward the door, letting the cold brush his overheated skin. Outside, dawn crept across the prairie, painting the sky in ash and rose. The world was shifting again, whether he wanted it to or not. He turned back toward the shack, watching its warm glow flicker against the pale sky. Something inside whispered that this night was not finished shaping him. And then he saw it, two silhouettes standing near the distant ridge, unmoving, watching the shack with unsettling stillness. He wasn't sure if they were men or trouble coming. Caleb stood in the doorway longer than he meant to, lantern raised, eyes fixed on the ridge where the two silhouettes lingered like questions carved from dawn. They didn't move. Didn't call out. Only watched the shack where Lien and her newborn rested. A thin current of unease crept under his skin. The prairie was generous with silence, but this silence felt wrong, like a breath held too long. When he stepped fully outside, the cold hardened around him. Behind him, Mei Lin murmured softly to her mother, her voice steady now, though exhaustion tugged at its edges. The newborn whimpered, a fluttering sound like wings against cloth. Caleb's heart steadied at the sound, then tightened with the awareness of the watchers. He waited another breath, then two, but the figures did not come closer. And when a gust of wind rolled across the ridge, they vanished into its fold, whether real or imagined, he couldn't tell. A man who had lived long with ghosts learned not to trust shadows or the direction they walked. He stepped back inside, shutting the door with deliberate quiet. The room glowed with firelight, warm and unexpectedly peaceful. Etta Crowley finished her work, tying her tools neatly back into her satchel. Her face, so often carved with judgment, softened as she watched Mei Lin cradle the child. "She'll need rest for days," Etta said, nodding toward Lien, who slept weakly but safely. "And help. More than a girl alone can manage." Mei Lin looked up. "I will care for her. I always have." "I know," Etta murmured, softer than anyone expected. "But you'll need supplies. Clean dressings. Food." After a pause, she added, "protection." The word hung in the air, heavier than the steam drifting from the kettle. Mei Lin understood instantly. Caleb saw it in the stiffness of her shoulders. Trouble had followed them before. It would again. Etta's gaze shifted to Caleb. There was no accusation in it now, only recognition that the responsibility forming in the room had a shape, and that shape kept circling back to him. He didn't shy from it. "I'll bring what they need," he said. Mei Lin studied him with a mixture of gratitude and caution. She had learned, perhaps too early, that help sometimes came with expectations, and expectations often came with cost. But Caleb's voice carried no demand, only a quiet certainty that seemed to settle the air around them. "Thank you," she whispered. He gave a small nod, uncomfortable under the weight of her sincerity. Etta gathered her coat. "I'll check on her tomorrow." She paused at the door. "And Caleb, the town's already stirring. Folks don't take kindly to things they don't understand. Be ready." He held her gaze. "Let them talk." Etta's mouth twitched into something that could almost have been approval before she stepped out into the waking morning. When she was gone, silence folded into the shack again, gentler this time, filled with new breaths and small beginnings. Caleb took a seat near the fire, rubbing the ache from his hands. He hadn't expected to be here after sunrise. He hadn't expected his heart to feel anything except its usual weight. But watching Mei Lin rock the infant, whispering a lullaby in her mother's tongue, something loosened in him, a knot he thought would stay knotted forever. The girl's voice was soft, fluid, unbroken despite the night she'd endured. Caleb didn't understand the words, but he understood their meaning. They held both promise and apology, love and fear of losing it. "She is beautiful," he said. Mei Lin startled slightly, as if unused to being spoken to with gentleness. "She is small," she murmured. "Smaller than she should be." "She's strong," he replied. "Born fighting." Mei Lin's lips curved, not into a full smile, something gentler, like dawn touching frost. "We will name her Yun. It means cloud. Soft, but able to travel far." Caleb nodded thoughtfully. "Yun," he repeated, letting the sound settle. Lien stirred, eyes fluttering open. Mei Lin instantly leaned close, offering water, brushing hair from her mother's face. Lien's gaze drifted to Caleb, filled with gratitude that needed no translation. He bowed his head, humbled by the silent exchange. "You helped us," Mei Lin said quietly, turning to him. "Even though we are strangers." Caleb looked into the fire. "Everyone's a stranger until they're not." She considered that, tracing its meaning like a delicate thread. Then her expression changed, small, but sharp enough for him to notice. Fear, resurfacing. "Those men," she said in a whisper. "Outside. Who were they?" He straightened. "I don't know." "Are they from the railroad camp?" she pressed. "Or from town?" "I didn't see their faces." Mei Lin swallowed. "Some men followed us before. Said my mother owed money for lodging after my father died. We had nothing left." Shame crept into her voice, though she had no reason to bear it. "We ran when we could. We hid when we couldn't." Caleb's jaw tightened. Debt collectors on the frontier were wolves wearing boots. And a widow with a daughter made for easy prey. "You're safe here," he said, and the steadiness in his voice surprised even him. Mei Lin met his gaze, searching for cracks. Finding none, she nodded. "I believe you." A soft cry came from Yun, and Mei Lin shifted her gently, the movement tender and instinctive. Caleb watched her with a heaviness in his chest, a reminder of the life he once imagined, the family he came close to having. But instead of the old pain tightening, it eased, as if the sight of mother and child had made space for something he thought long dead. He rose slowly. "I'll fetch supplies. You'll need broth, blankets, fresh water." Mei Lin nodded but didn't hide her worry. "Will the town accept us?" He didn't answer right away. Truth had its own gravity. "Some will," he said finally. "Some won't. But you won't be facing them alone." Her breath caught at that, a flicker of trust warming her eyes. "Thank you, Caleb Boone." He touched the brim of his hat, a gesture half instinct, half promise. Then he stepped outside, letting the cold morning wrap around him. The sun was fully risen now, painting the prairie in gold and long shadows. But when he glanced toward the ridge where the silhouettes had stood, he saw something that hadn't been there before. Tracks. Fresh. Leading toward town. And another set, smaller, lighter, circling back toward the shack. Not just watchers. Hunters. Caleb followed the tracks in the snow until they vanished into the rising wind, lines fading into the pale light like warnings whispered too softly. The earth was still cold beneath his boots, holding the memory of whoever had stood watching the shack before dawn. Every instinct in him tightened. Trouble was not simply near, it was circling. He turned back toward the crooked home where Mei Lin, Lien, and the newborn rested, lantern glow flickering softly against the thin wood. Life had entered that place only hours ago, delicate as breath on glass. He would not let danger take it. Inside, Mei Lin sat near the fire, Yun resting against her shoulder, tiny chest rising and falling with fragile rhythm. Lien dozed lightly, her color slightly improved, though her strength had not returned. The room carried the scent of boiled cloth, smoke, and new life, an ache and a balm intertwined. When Caleb entered, Mei Lin lifted her gaze at once, sensing the change in the air before he spoke. "What did you find?" she asked, her whisper threaded with dread. "Tracks," he answered simply. "2 sets." He removed his hat, letting the warmth settle over him. They were watching you. Her arms tightened around the infant. They found us again. Caleb crouched before her so they met at eye level. You're safe for now, but they'll return. He saw fear, exhaustion, resilience, all living inside her like embers. We need a plan. I can leave, she whispered. If they want money, if they want punishment for debts, they will follow me, not Mama. No, Caleb said, too quickly. The word surprised them both. He steadied his voice, softened it. Running won't save you. And you're not alone anymore. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, something deeper, a fragile belief she hadn't dared hold before this morning. Why are you helping us? She asked. He didn't answer right away. The fire crackled, filling the room with a gentle glow. Because I know what it is to lose everything, he said at last. And I know what it is to wish someone had cared enough to stand with me. She studied him, reading the truth behind his quiet tone. Mei Lin had learned long ago that the strongest vows were not shouted. They were spoken softly, then proven in action. Caleb Boone, with all his grief and silence, had proven more in one night than others had in years. Lien stirred, calling weakly for water. Mei Lin rose, rocking Yun gently as she helped her mother sip from a tin cup. Caleb watched the three of them, the fragile, beautiful circle that had formed in the dim hours of a winter dawn. They were strangers only by circumstance, not by spirit. Something bound them now. Something he couldn't name but felt with a certainty that startled him. He moved toward the door. I need to fetch supplies from town. I'll be quick. Mei Lin turned sharply. Town is dangerous for us. People look at us like ghosts. They'll look at me first, he said. And today, that's enough. She hesitated, then nodded. When he stepped outside, she whispered after him, Come back. Caleb felt the words settle between them like a promise. The ride into town cut through biting wind. The streets were waking up, smoke rising from chimneys, hooves striking icy dirt. But conversation stilled when Caleb passed. Folks eyed him with curiosity, caution, judgment. The Boone Ranch had long been a place of quiet sorrow. Now it was a place filled with whispers about a Chinese family under his protection. Rumors grew like winter weeds. Sheriff Rudd stepped off the boardwalk. Boone, he drawled, squinting. Heard you were out late last night. Heard you weren't alone. Caleb reined in his horse. Heard correctly. You're taking a risk, the sheriff said, not unkindly. Town's uneasy about outsiders moving in without permission. No one needs permission to survive, Caleb replied. Rudd sighed. Just be careful. Not everyone's like me. Caleb knew that was true. And dangerous. Inside the general store, gossip clung to the corners like dust. Mrs. Albright handed him blankets, broth ingredients, tinctures for fever, all while her eyes narrowed with speculation. You living with strangers now, Caleb? She asked sharply. Helping a family in need, he said evenly. Some folks say trouble follows that kind. Then they're welcome to keep their distance. He paid, left, and mounted his horse as whispers swelled behind him. The town had already drawn its judgments. But Caleb had already chosen his side. As he rode back toward the shack, a crow cawed overhead, sharp, warning. The wind carried something else. Voices. Male voices. Too close. Caleb urged his horse faster. When he reached the ridge, he saw them, 2 men approaching the shack, their steps deliberate, their coats long and dusted with frost. He recognized the type before he recognized the faces. Collectors, camp enforcers, men who lived on taking from those who had nothing left to give. Caleb's pulse hammered. He kicked his horse into a swift descent. Mei Lin stood in the doorway, clutching Yun, shielding the child with her body. Lien tried to rise behind her but was too weak. The taller man sneered. We're owed money, he growled. Camp dues. Interest. We have nothing, Mei Lin said, voice trembling. You've always got something, he replied, stepping forward. No, Caleb barked, galloping in. His horse stopped hard as he swung down between them and the doorway. "Whatever business you think you've got, it ends now." The men stiffened. "This ain't your concern, Boone." "It is now." The shorter man spat. "You gonna pay their debt? Take on their sins too." Caleb stepped closer, jaw set. Their only sin was surviving. The tall man reached for Mei Lin. Caleb grabbed his wrist, twisting it until the man hissed in pain. "You touch her again," Caleb said quietly, "and you won't use that hand for anything." A silence fell, thick, dangerous. The shorter man reached for his coat pocket. Caleb moved faster. He shoved him back, knocking him into the snow. "You want a fight," Caleb said, eyes burning with something old and fierce. "But I'm not giving you one. You're leaving. Now." The men exchanged a look, anger, fear, calculation, then finally stepped away. "This ain't over," the tall one spat. Caleb didn't blink. "It is for today." When they disappeared into the ridge, Caleb exhaled, breath shaking. He turned back toward the doorway. Mei Lin stood there, eyes wide, the newborn nestled against her. Her lower lip trembled, not with fear now, but something far more disarming. "You protected us," she whispered. Caleb lowered his eyes, overwhelmed by the softness in her tone. "Anyone would have." "No," she said gently. "Not anyone." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The fire glowed warmly, and Lien looked at him with exhausted gratitude. Mei Lin shifted Yun, offering the baby's tiny hand toward him as though sharing a piece of hope. Something inside Caleb, something long frozen, began to thaw. Outside, wind scraped across the ridge, carrying the echo of the men's promise of return. But inside the shack, a family, unexpected, fragile, forming in the hush of winter, took its first breath of safety. And Caleb Boone understood, with startling clarity, that this was only the beginning of a battle worth fighting.